messy. We are getting ready to get started. I'm Patty Gaddis, and I'm your moderator for today, and I'm a client executive here at Leadership Strategies. And I have with me Michael Wilkinson, our facilitator for today, and we have a special guest, Sinead Condon from Guidewire Software. So today's topic, we are facilitating the hybrid workplace. It's going to be messy. And a couple of topics that we're going to cover, and we have a lot to cover today. The hybrid workplace, what is it? What isn't it? And how can we get in front of it? We're going to touch on leadership, what happens to managing by walking around when you can't do it anymore. Fellowship, what happens if you remain in a 1-inch tile on Zoom and not in front of your employees and your staff. And then adding to the meaning of equity and inclusion in the hybrid world. We're going to talk proactively addressing the Great Resignation, and then taking action, influencing your organization to be intentional. So we have a lot to cover in the next hour. A couple of housekeeping items that we want to cover. This is your webinar, so we want you to ask questions and put your chats in there, and I will be your voice and ask them. We have a lot of people, we have everybody on mute today because we have so many participants on the webinar. So if you have questions, put them in the question and answer panel, or there's other ways up on the screen where you can reach us. Again, all attendees are on mute, but we encourage your questions through the question and answer panel. Now, we are always looking to improve and get better, so we'll give you a little something for your feedback. At the end of the webinar, you'll receive in the chat a link to a survey, and if you fill out that survey, you'll get a white paper, The Virtuals of Virtual. It's a survey of over 400 executives on the state of virtual meetings, and then people are always asking us for a copy of our slide presentation. So you will also receive a copy of those slides. Again, fill out the chat. In the chat, you'll see the survey. If you fill out the survey, you'll get all this great information. We have a lot of new people here today. So for those of you who are new to Leadership Strategies, a little bit of who we are. We are the market leader in facilitation and training services. We have trained over 35,000 people in our effective facilitator workshops. And we have over 43, there are 43 master certified facilitators in the world. That's the highest designation in our industry. And 10 are on our 27-member core team. So our team has a depth of resource and experience that we bring to each session that we facilitate. We also manage a database of facilitators where we have over 600 people under contract. So that helps us respond to our clients regionally. And then we also offer public workshops in over 12 major U.S. cities when we can. And then we also deliver our training privately, on-site, or virtually for all of our clients. And then our partner for today, who is Guidewire. They are the most trusted insurtech platform in the industry. They have 450 customers in 34 countries. They have 100% focus on property and casualty. So that's their specialty, 1,000 plus implementations, 800 plus consultants, and 10,000 plus partner experts, and then over 3,000 employees and growing. So we are very excited to have with us today Sinead Condon, who is the Chief People Officer at Guidewire Software. She brings a wealth of experience, over 20 years managing and leading integrated people, processes, and technology projects. She was named a top 50 leader in learning and development in the Americas. She's a Brandon Hall Awards winner in learning and transformation, and she brings 10 years plus startup advisory and founder coach in the Silicon Valley. So we welcome, and we are so happy to have Sinead with us today. And we'll also have our facilitator today, Michael Wilkinson. He is our CEO and Managing Director here at Leadership Strategies. He's a board member of the International Institute for Facilitation. He is a member of the International Hall of Fame. He is one of those certified master facilitators I talked about earlier. And he is an author and a leader in the facilitation. And kick it off with a poll. Oh, Michael, we're not hearing you.
Isn't it a wonderful thing? As often as we've been doing virtual meetings, have to remember to click the unmute button. So thank you, everybody, for being a part of this session, this whole idea of the hybrid workplace, because we all know things have changed, but there's another shift that's coming. We know that people are going to begin going back to work in droves. For some organizations, it's already happened, but it is coming, and it will be a very different workplace. And if we aren't clear about what are the things we need to be doing now to prepare, and what do we need to be doing when it occurs, we will be behind the eight ball. We'll have all kinds of new issues that we will have to deal with. So this workshop is all about understanding what's coming, what can you do to prepare, how do you get your company engaged around these kind of topics, what to look out for. And I'm just so pleased to have with me Sinead Condon from Guidewire. We've worked together on several engagements. She is one of those strategic thinkers. You know, the person who, while most of us are thinking about this down here, she's already thinking about this up here. And so, Sinead, I'm just really pleased that you're with me and look forward to your thoughts as we go on. But let's go ahead and start with a first poll. We'd like to know a little bit about your workforce. So think about prior to the pandemic. The question is about what percentage of your workforce was in office versus remote. So we got over 100 people on this call. So we really would love to get your thoughts on this poll. What percentage of your people were actually, before the pandemic, in office? 90%, 75 to 89%, 50% to 74, 25 to 49, less than 25. I'm wondering, what would you expect to see? What kind of shape would you expect this curve to be, Sinead? You're thinking a U-shaped curve maybe, or maybe a hockey puck, or maybe the descending growth curve. What do you think that this curve will look like when the answers are in?
Are you asking me?
Sure. What's your thought on what you'd expect to see in this particular poll? What do you think will show up?
I'm thinking, let me see, more than 90% of the office. I think it's going to be a 50-50 here. We'll see what it looks like.
Okay, so 50-50. Well, let's take a look. Let's close that poll. 77% of you voted on this, and let's share the results. And Sinead, you're absolutely right. 53% said more than 90%. So everyone else was the rest of the group. And so you can see the two high points there. After 53%, 19% said 75 to 89, 15% said less than 25. So you can see the idea that it's really high on the top end. So think about these numbers. So think about the curve as being a 53% way up here, drops down to 19, then drops lower to the 7s, and then back up to the 19. So it's this kind of curve is what you're seeing. Well, let's ask this same question. I'm going to hide this poll. Let's do this second poll. This is about what you expect your workforce to look like a year from now. What percentage do you expect to be in office a year from now? And let's check out what the difference is. So let's go ahead and start that second poll. A year from now, what would you expect? More than 90? 75 to 89? 50 to 74? 25 to 49? And let me say, Sinead, these answers are looking really different. So we'll give it another 10 seconds on this poll as answers are coming in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and close out that poll and just think about it. Remember before, it was the high at 90. It came down really fast, and then it tweaked up at 25%, at less than 25%. Take a look at this curve. Oh my, it starts low, peaks at 50 to 74, and this is much closer to the classic bell-shaped curve. This is a massive shift in workforce behavior. So we're expecting 43% are saying 50 to 74% of your people will be in the office, but 42% of you have said less than 50% will be in the office. Where before that number was less than 90%. So you get the idea, major shift going on. So what we want to talk about then is a few things. One, what is this thing called a hybrid workplace? What is it? And why get in front of it? Then we're going to get into leadership. What happens to leaders? And how do you have to be different as a leader to really reflect on this experience in this new workplace? Then we use the term fellowship. So leadership is one thing. Fellowship is another. We're going to not talk about leaders, but talk about you, everyone who has somebody that they report to. What happens if you remain just on a Zoom screen, just that 1-inch tile? And then equity and inclusion. There's now a new issue. There's now as you will see, a new potentially discriminated employee when we go to the hybrid world. And then everyone's talking these days about the Great Resignation. So how do you get proactively in front of that? And then taking action. What are the steps you can do to help your organization be more intentional? Well, let's get into that very first topic, the hybrid workplace, and what is it? We have a quick definition to say what's different about virtual versus hybrid. We say hybrid is when there's 25% or more in the office and 25% or more virtual. So you have both those things happening. Now, I'd love to turn to you, Sinead. Let me get your experience in terms of what it is and why it's different. Take us there, if you would, Sinead.
Yeah. And thank you for inviting me today. It's so exciting to go play in the sandbox with you for a little while today.
We play well. It's always fun.
So thank you for that. So, you know, it's interesting to hear you talk about kind of the 25% or more in the office, 25% or more virtual. I think when I think of hybrid, because it's been interesting for the last 20 months, because you often hear, certainly I have heard people say, I've been doing this all my life. I've been remote all my life. Or, you know, I'm used to just being in the office 3 days a week. It's no big deal, right? I think where it's different coming out of the pandemic, and not to spend too much, I mean, I want to find balance between talking about the pandemic and not making it all about that. But I think where the opportunity has become is, and you guys are going to hear me talk about this a lot, is the intentionality around how we see work now coming out of the pandemic.
I love that word.
I had a lot of time to think about it, right? We were kind of forced into a place where if I was sitting in an office, now I'm in this new backdrop that I've had to kind of
exactly,
right? And so I think what I'd like to land here is not just, yeah, sure, I'm a different category. I used to be in an office, or now I'm working from home. But it's leaning into how deliberately do we want to think about how we work together. And I think that's where the backdrop now becomes the opportunity to think differently about the workplace that we may not necessarily have taken more intentionally in the past.
Very much so. And I am there all over. And one of the things Sinead has done is she used that word that is so important here, intentionality. Really being clear. And so, as Sinead has already said, what isn't it? It isn't business as usual. It isn't what had been happening before the pandemic. It's a whole different world. So I want to ask you, Sinead, why get in front of it? Why is it so important for organizations not to say, well, you know, we'll tackle that when it comes? Why is it important to get in front of it?
I think there's two things. I think one is we've all learned a lot. And I think there's the moment to internalize on, well, what has it been like for me for the last 18 months, 2 years? What have I learned? What new skills do I have in my back pocket? I've had to learn to use collaboration tools I've never used before. I had to learn to lean in and ask my manager what he wants or what she wants of me because things have shifted. So there's opportunity for that conversation and to facilitate that. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely.
Right. And this is a rare second chance to make a first impression. Right. So here we have this opportunity that has been presented to us, which is, you know, what do we want it to be and how do we want to talk about it? And what better time now when we're all thinking about this idea of kind of reboarding. I've worked in Guidewire for 2.5 years. 2.5 years ago, I was onboarded. It was prior to the pandemic. But now I'm coming back. I've learned a lot. I'm in a different environment now. And so here's a rare second chance for me to make a first impression and also for Guidewire to make a first impression with folks that have been here maybe, you know, for many years.
It's a great opportunity. So we don't want to miss that opportunity, as you're saying, and I buy it 100%. Well, I'm going to ask you, and you're pretty transparent about stuff, and so I appreciate it. And Sinead, I want to take advantage of it. So what is Guidewire experiencing right now? Just right now, where things are. How far are you along in this hybrid transformation? And what are some of the issues that you all are seeing as you go through it?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I took this job as Chief People Officer of Guidewire 2 weeks before the pandemic really hit.
Oh, my.
And so I was already, I mean, we were beginning to see little signs of it, but who would have thought? None of us would have thought that it was going to be where we are today and the experience we've all had. But I was beginning to think about, as I was kind of looking internally at what kind of chief people officer I wanted to be for Guidewire, for the people of Guidewire, for our stakeholders, for our customers. How did I want to show up? And as I was beginning to think about that, I was thinking about the employee experience. I was thinking about the candidate experience. 2 or 3 weeks later, we certainly had to make a decision that we were not going to onboard anybody live. We were going to have to do it virtually.
Wow.
And hired over 1,000 people during the first year of COVID. And these are, people that we all got to know each other from here up, right? Well, you can see me in this 1-inch square tile, right? So, you know me really well. And here's the thing, as we've been experiencing, to this point, we've experienced, again, I'm a glass half full kind of person. I've learned more about people from their homes, with their children coming up and hugging them from behind, the dog barking, just life in general. We've learned a lot about our community. We're experiencing that right now. We don't want to lose that, right? We don't want to lose that. But the other part, which is, look, as we look to expand in our company, we've got beautiful new offices. We're about to launch a new beautiful office in Dublin, Ireland, and we hope people get to experience it. But even our office in Silicon Valley, we haven't had people in there for 1.5 years. So, we want to obviously give people choice and flexibility, but we want people to be able to come in and collaborate. So we're going to think about how we use our offices differently.
Okay, so I'm sure there are people wondering the same thing I'm wondering. Did I hear that right? During the pandemic, you all hired 1,000 people?
Yeah, actually more than 1,000.
What, are you Amazon or something? What's going on?
I mean, that, we are a high growth company. We're excited to bring in, we're hiring all the time. So it's very, very exciting to us. But here's the other thing that we've also experienced. And when we think about programs and getting super creative and innovative, when you want to attract talent, how do you attract talent and how do you retain talent in this backdrop that we're in? And we were very deliberate to say we want to give people choice. And so now we have a program called Work From Anywhere on Earth, almost, right? And so giving people the opportunity to work from anywhere within appropriate guidelines. Some of our Scrum teams, obviously in engineering, can't necessarily do that as well. But there's lots of learnings in all of this. But again, second chance to make a first impression. So how do we want to be very intentional in how we design our organizations and our teams?
Well, would you say a word, because I see the question in the question panel there around how are you onboarding people in this remote environment? What are some of the strategies you all are using?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them are kind of the normal strategies, like you always want to have a buddy, right? So, somebody's coming new into, anytime you onboard somebody, whether you're virtual or live physically in an office, it's hard to navigate at the best of times. So you always want somebody to have the go-to people, and not necessarily just their HR business partner or their manager, but somebody who knows how to navigate and can be dynamic with you as you learn. And those are kind of some of the normal best practices. But I think also, so being very deliberate about that, I think is important. Also, just the giving people the opportunity to use new technologies, I think that's important. So how are we intentional about the technology we use so people get to collaborate? But there's one thing I think that's most important in all of this over the last 2 years, and a lot of people have called this a crisis culture. Don't necessarily, that can land with you whichever way you want it to. But one thing we all know, and I think we've all experienced it, if we've had any crisis in our lives at all, is that we want to be around people that have empathy and compassion for what we're going through. And so community, having a sense of village, people coming together is really important. So we've harnessed the power of our cohorts coming in to be there for each other, to create a kind of self-organizing community that they can lean on each other and support each other as they are onboarding into a new and transitioning into a new, not only a new way of working, but a new company.
And you all can see me writing notes as I'm learning, as I'm hearing the giving people the opportunity for new technology, and then community building. Community is really vital to this. Well, let's move on, shall we? And that's great stuff. I really appreciate it, because I want to go on to get to the second issue, which is major. So we've talked about the hybrid workplace, what it is, what it isn't. It's not what it's been, and why get in front of it. So let's get into leadership. So we're talking about, how do leaders have to be different in this new environment? So I've got a question for you, and my ask is that you go ahead and answer it in the question panels. And so, what do you believe will be the hardest part of the hybrid work environment for leaders? What's going to be the hardest thing for them? And Patty, if you would, as answers are coming in, we're going to go ahead and ask you. We'll go ahead and read the first 10 answers that come through. But the question we're asking, if you would type your answer in the question panel, what do you believe will be the hardest part of the hybrid work environment for leaders coming through? And so let's take a look at a few of those answers, Patty.
They are coming in fast. They're coming in so fast. Engagement, inequitable technology, establishing a personal relationship, keeping engagement in team meetings and workshops when you have people in the office and virtual. Let's see, connecting with each employee, having people in the office and virtual, communication, communication and people problems, keeping people connected, engaged, and getting a sense of...
Interesting. We're hearing it. We are definitely hearing it. And thank you for that, because I'm seeing three major themes here in what you were calling out. And so I'm going to use some names here as we're saying it. We have several people talk about the engagement. Heather mentioned the engagement. Gary, the personal relationships, which speaks to that second theme around connection and how important that is. And several of you mentioned the connection also from Tristan, but several of you mentioned communication. Tristan mentioned communication. Pete, letting the quieter personalities in the virtual space be heard. All about, and what's interesting is, with all the comments we have, and I'm previewing them now, only 2 people mentioned technology. That leaders, and we all get it, that leaders, it's going to be about people, because we don't lead things, we lead people. And so 3 themes: connection, engagement, communication. So those are the 3 that you're speaking to. Well, let's hear from the expert, leadership in the hybrid world, and love to hear from you, Sinead. What are you seeing? Our group has said engagement, connection, and communication. What are you seeing in your environment as the toughest issues for leaders? And how is Guidewire addressing these?
Yeah, I think those 3 themes are so important. And let me start with kind of the communication part first, because I think all of us have learned, in our own backdrops, the pandemic, being all remote, has forced all of us to be actually more agile. And what I mean by that is, if we look at the principles of kind of building agility into your organizations, not just about being faster, but it's also about, are we working on the right stuff? Are we working on stuff that's important? How do I know I'm not in with my team? I'm not, riffing at a whiteboard. I'm not physically in an office with a whole bunch of people. And sometimes things can get lost in translation at the best of times, not to mind just, whether you're physical or remote. And so, one of the things that we've been certainly very deliberate about is making sure that every single person feels connected to what our greater purpose is. Like, what are we working on? What do we need to be working on? We so have Zoom fatigue. We have backlog fatigue. We've been asked to do so much. And so it's really important, as we kind of accelerate our agility within our organizations, that we learn to be transparent with each other. And that means, the manager sharing, hey, here's what's most important. We're coming into Q2 or whatever, wherever you are in your cycle. This is what we need to be focused on to help teams and individuals really narrow down, because there's only so many hours in the day. And if there's anything we've learned, is people have, it's muddied between breakfast, lunch, and dinner because we're all at home, right? And so we tend to actually work more, right? But we want to work smarter, not harder, not just more hours in the day. So communication around what's most important, what should we be working on, where's the value, what's the impact that we're trying to create. I think that's important. And there's
it becomes more important than ever.
Yeah, it really is, right? And I think there's a self-advocacy piece in there too, because sometimes managers are not necessarily equipped, the most equipped to be grand communicators and effective communicators. And so we have to lean in as team members to say, can you help me prioritize? I have a lot on my backlog. I'm doing a lot. Can you help me, refine my backlog so that I'm working on what's most important? I think that's going to be really...
Sinead, you have just taught me something, Sinead, and I want to underscore it. Notice, Sinead, we're talking about leaders, right? And what leaders can do in this. And what Sinead has just gone to is talked about how you can help your leader be a better leader. Because you heard her say about priorities and communication. And so if your leader is not prioritizing, instead of saying to the leader, get with it, you're not prioritizing, just do the Sinead model. Hey, can you help me prioritize what's most important here? You get the idea, Slick. I heard that, Sinead. I can see why you're Chief People Officer. Yes, that's the way to get that. And yeah, it's good. Really, really good stuff. And so those are the kinds of things that really does make sense. And are you all doing anything specifically with your leaders to help equip them to be better leaders in the hybrid world?
Yeah, I think so much of that is important. I mean, there's kind of, for me, look, we have a management team meeting every Monday where all the leaders come together at the executive level, and we spend a lot of time talking about, the pulse of the organization. What are we seeing? Because transparency is so important. And how do we keep people connected? And so there has to be, for me, there's kind of the top down and the bottoms up, right? This is where community comes into play, right? Because so much of this, and this is something that we've really been intentional to reinforce, is that we want to be fully transparent, and we want to make sure that people understand how they're contributing, and making sure that we are having that conversation all the time. And there's an element of co-creation that comes with that. Now, can I just say one thing that popped into my head? Above all, the most important thing in my sense making is to create trust and safety within an organization. Because the more trust and safety that we create, the more people are willing to lean in and co-create together, first and foremost.
And Alyssa and Nicola are going, yes, that's exactly what I said. Alyssa said trust. They need to be able to trust their knowledge workers, establish connections. Nicola said trusting people are working. And let's go there, because I'd love to hear your experience with Guidewire. So the older Steve mentioned older managers buying in, and Nicola, trusting people are working. Of course, the old managers are thinking command and control. Oh my God, how am I going to control these people if they're not in the office? And then as Nicola said, trusting people are working. So what are you all doing at Guidewire? Because this could be the Wild Wild West. Everyone's at home doing their own thing, working at their own pace, doing whatever they're doing. How are you ensuring that productivity is staying high in this hybrid world?
Yeah, there's something that you taught me, and for listeners that are on, let me be very transparent. Michael Wilkinson has been a phenomenal mentor to me in my career, and I've learned a lot from Michael.
Oh my!
And one of the things that you have taught me really, really well is to build skill into the organization that is facilitative leadership. And that goes across the organization. And facilitative leadership is it's the backbone of how we do everything, because it is our ability and our leaders' ability to be able to create the space to have a conversation about how we want to work together, right? And so much of what we do in Guidewire is being able to, and especially, to the point of what about older folks and kind of more traditional command and control leaders, is teaching them the skill of what it means to facilitate the conversation rather than to kind of bear down and say, this is how it's going to be. Now, not everybody is willing to do that. That is part of the philosophy of Guidewire, that we create autonomy and safety in our organization. We're very intentional about that. But not everybody's going to get there, and that's okay. That's okay. But you know, if you're clear on your value system and you know the kind of culture you want to create, then you can bring people along for the ride.
All right, you mentioned facilitative leadership, Sinead, and so our team back here has been scrambling. My gosh, Michael, we've got to put something up on facilitative leadership. So let's do that. Let's take advantage of that opportunity. So here's this book that I've written, The 8 Core Practices of Facilitative Leaders. Where's this come from? If you think about a leader in your experience who really helped you excel, really made a difference in your career, I bet you're going to find that one or more of these practices were essential to their work. So I want to show you, and what this is about is the things that leaders do to really give power to their people, to bring out the best in their people. So 8 core practices of facilitative leaders. One comes from Simon Sinek's work. Start with the why, engage with the how. Leaders often want to just tell the team, here's what I need you to do. Here's what I need you to do. No. Start with the why. Always start with the why. Here is why. Because once they buy into the why, they will run through walls for you. But they have to buy into the why. 2, understand and empower, don't command and control. And this is all the stuff that we all know around situation leadership, that you really need to understand the people who are working with you and empower them appropriately. We don't have to look over everyone and be watching them. One of my favorite phrases is, let the process do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
You just put processes in place that help people to succeed. By the process, working the process helps them succeed. Communicate in their language, not yours. For those who are familiar with communication styles, dysfunctions, and so on, you can be so much more effective with your people if you're speaking in their language, and there's so much more in that. This is the one that is, for me personally, my growing edge. As a leader, when someone makes a mistake, if you're a natural process improver, and that's me, I'm a natural process improver, my creator made me that way, my focus is on correcting, instructing, giving guidance. But this principle, what facilitative leaders do so well, they connect first, correct second. Connect first, and then correct second, because they can be so much more effective when you connect before you correct. Then equip for success, monitor for results. You know, many leaders, they quote, empower people, and they say, hey, I need you to go do it, make it happen. Little do they recognize that so-called empowerment is really capitulation. They're just capitulating, saying, well, good luck. When we say, hey, empowerment's important, but to do that well, you have to equip for success, making sure your people have the skills they need to have, and then absolutely monitor for results so that you can connect first, correct second along the way. 6, engage conflict, encourage disagreement. Unfortunately, so many leaders don't understand how to deal with disagreement. And so what do? They discourage it. So I know no one disagrees here. Or listen, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, but we're going to move forward. No. We say engage conflict and encourage disagreement, because if someone says, let's do this, and everyone says, okay, well, you know, with just a little creative abrasion, someone says, let's do this. Yeah, that could work, but what about this? Well, that's better, but what about this? Oh, that's even better. What about this? You can get even better outcomes when you are encouraging disagreement. Disagreement just means a better outcome hasn't been found yet. And so you want to have that creative abrasion to come up with that. But if you don't know how to deal with disagreements, by the way, there are only 3 reasons people disagree. Every disagreement in the world. And then strategies for addressing them. And then strategic thinking. This is not for just leaders. Strategic thinking is thinking with a broad vision of where things are going and what do we need to have to do today to make it happen. Unfortunately, tactical thinkers are, what's my situation today? What do I need to do to fix today? A strategic thinker is always thinking forward. where is this going? What do we need to be doing today to get there? And then the 8, start, execute, and close every meeting masterfully. You've heard Sinead speak about Zoom fatigue. And you know what? We know in our business, it's not really Zoom fatigue. It's bad meeting fatigue. See, in the normal office environment, when we were face-to-face, we had so many other things going on except for meetings. We went from bad meeting to doing something else, to bad meeting to doing something else. Well, now it's bad meeting to bad meeting to bad meeting to bad meeting. We are suffering, and it happens to be on Zoom, so we're blaming Zoom for what really is bad meeting fatigue. And so creating an environment, and many leaders spend 70, 80% of their time in meetings. Those things have to be masterful. Well, those are those 8 principles. And if something you want to know about, Patty will tell you more about it later. But these 3 in particular speak to the hybrid environment. Connecting first, because it's so hard to connect in the hybrid world that you have to be really, really focused there. Equip for success, monitor for results. Well, before you could monitor by walking around, it's a different process. And then as we talked about, Zoom fatigue, those meetings, using engagement in those meetings, really critical. Now, here's my question for you. Go ahead and type your question into the question panel. As you look over these 8 principles, when it comes to a hybrid work environment, what's the one thing you wish the leaders in your organizations were better at? You could do it by number if you want, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or just say better at understanding and empowering, better at communicating. Which of these 8 would be better at? And so, again, Patty, if you would read the first 5 answers or 10 answers that come through, what are you seeing there?
All right, I'm looking for them to come through. Go ahead and put them in the question and answer chat.
Oh my, I see Heather has said number 5, equip for success. Renee has said number 2, understand and empower. Both Amy and Sarah have said equip. Sarah said engage. Diane said number 4, connect first. Equip for success, again from Jose. Rita said 2, understand and empower. A 5 from equip for success. 7, drive strategic thinking. Kelly says less ambiguity, daggone it. 1, start with the why. Wow, we're really all over the place, but looking at the numbers, I see a lot of 7 and a lot of 5. Equipping for success and driving strategic thinking. Steve says all of them all the way through. Well, you get the idea. So equipping leaders to do that well is really a critical thing. It's something we want to do. Patty, you were going to add to that?
No, I'm good. There was a lot coming in. We're good.
You're good. Okay. Any thoughts? Any thoughts around that, Sinead, as you're seeing those responses? A lot of 5s, a lot of 7s, a number of 2s as well. Understand and empower?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. All of them are important. I think if I can bring it back to hybrid, us being in this remote environment, I think has taught us a couple of things. One is we know what we want, but more importantly, we know what we don't want, right?
Yeah.
I've spoken to lots of people who said, hey, I had a 3-hour commute. It almost killed me. And now I make pancakes with my daughter in the mornings, and I love to do that. And so I want to change the way I think about how I work and my working day, and, how I want to talk to people and who I want to talk to and how I want to do that. And so I think there's an element of you have an opportunity, all of us, whether you're a manager or a team member, to design how you want to work, because maybe it's different now. Right? I've had people who said, I miss my podcast that I used to listen to as I was doing my commute, and I actually want to go back to that, right? So we're all over the place in terms of how we want to work. So I think that is, as you look at, 1 to 8, think about that. Is it the same for you today as it was 2 years ago, right? You might have recalibrated how your own judgments and biases and beliefs and all of that. So has your own kind of worldview shifted in the 2 years? Because if it has, even a little bit, no one will know unless you have that conversation, right? So there's an element kind of back to facilitating the working agreement. How do we know it's working? How do we know it's not? And writing that down, right? Kind of creating these contracts, if you will, with each other and with our leaders. The one thing I will say about kind of empowering, and it's the same for a lot of language. Language is very subjective. What it means to empower for me may be different, Michael, for what it means for you. And I want to throw out one thing there. that I learned about empowerment many years ago from a guy called Kimball Fisher, who has a really great book on teams. And he said, empowerment, you need four things. You need accountability, you need authority, you need, actually it's ARIA, A-R-I-A. It's accountability, it's resources, it's information and authority. So what does that mean if you break it down? We all know maybe what we're accountable for, but do we have the same amount of authority to be able to make decisions? And that somebody mentioned about ambiguity. And I think life got a little ambiguous over the course of the last 2 years. And so now it's a time to say, is my job still the same? Do I need different types of information now? Do I need access to different things? Because over the last 2 years, I wasn't caught in a time warp. Life actually and work has evolved. And so we've been so caught up in kind of the moment in time. I hear a lot of people say the last 2 years is just a blip, like, you know, forget about it. But a lot of stuff has actually happened. And so do we have the same authority and accountability that we had before, and do we need to recalibrate?
Nice, really nice, as we think through those 8 principles and how to apply them. Well, we've talked about leadership. We've talked about we're ready to go to fellowship. And this is really, that's kind of threatening if you think about it. What happens if you remain a 1-inch tile? And here's a question for you. How likely is it that you personally will be a remote employee a year from now? Just wondering, for those on the call, with that poll, how likely is it that you will be a 1-inch tile, basically a year from now? You will be a 1-inch. Would you go ahead and we'll launch that poll? 80 to 60%, 60 to 70%, 40 to 59%, 20 to 39, less than 20. We'll make this a quick poll. We'll leave it at the 10 seconds now. Got over 55% of you voting already. We'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and close that poll. Interestingly enough, we are, just as we keep seeing, that almost nearly 50% saying 80 to 100% likely that they will be a remote employee a year from now. So that could be half our workforce continuing to be remote a year from now. And so that means this is relevant. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts for the group on this today as to how do you do that? And so people who choose to stay remote, what should they consider? And then what strategies could support this hybrid first mentality? Because we know we don't want to be a second-class citizen as a part of this. So let me get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time talking about that. And, you know, there's kind of goodness in the 1-inch square tile in one sense, because it levels the playing field, right? So if you're on, you know, there's 15 people on the call, you're all on Zoom or whatever your tool of choice is, and you're on with, you know, people that are, you know, whatever the hierarchy is, if there's hierarchy in your organization, but we're all a 1-inch square tile. So it does level the playing field in that respect. It kind of removes a little bit of that hierarchy. One of the best practices that we've been putting into place, because many of us are kind of coming back into the office now, is that even though there might be 6 of us in a room, we're all on Zoom so that we're all still a 1-inch square tile, right? And you know, it does a lot. You get to see who's talking because you can see that, you know, their tile lights up or whatever that is. So I do encourage people to continue to do that. The other thing, I think there is a recognition, or at least an acknowledgement, that, you know, meetings where there are 10 people live, you know, physically in an office and then a bunch of people dialed in, it is that by just the format of it, it is optimized for physical, right? For a physical meeting. That's unfortunate. And so to do that well, again, you know, having everybody on Zoom helps. But also, and we just literally did an offsite on Monday and Tuesday of last week, and we had a bunch of people dialed in from all over the world. And it's you know, we went into it, we had a working agreement. How do we want to be in this meeting together? How can we make sure that you you know, that are dialed in have enough space to be able to interject? You have to kind of design it, I think, very, very well, right? And be, again, here's that word again, be intentional about it, right? Is creating space. Like you finish talking about a topic, or you're halfway through and you stop and say, hey, we want to give people on the call an opportunity to weigh in. And just be so good about creating space for people now, right? And to be very, I will, and you're the master of this, right? You're on a call and you're very deliberate to say, so Sinead, how, I haven't heard from you. What would you like to say on it? Again, trust and safety, which I think has come up in this conversation. But I think that's part of what that is. And we talked a lot about connecting and building relationship, right? It's much easier to be in this kind of a hybrid format when you know people, right? Because then you're more able to lean in and have a voice, right? So I really encourage folks to try and build relationships. Sometimes that's an edge for people, they're maybe introverted or they don't feel that they can do that well. But even bringing that up into the space and saying, I need to be able to build better relationships. Can you help me, right? And there's lots of people out there willing to help and support so that we can get this right.
And that's that self-advocacy that you, once more, coming back. Well, I want to speak on this just a little deeper here, and it's around the meaning of equity and inclusion in a hybrid workplace. So here's what we have found, that basically what ends up happening when you go hybrid is that you end up creating possibility of creating second-class citizens. That you can see in this picture how everyone's interacting with everyone else, but here is that second-class citizen on the screen pretty much ignored. And so we'll likely have a new class of employees who are, quite frankly, unfairly discriminated against in terms of these two words, inclusion and equity. So, and as I am, if you happen to be a member already of a discriminated group, it could be possibly a double whammy. Just natural discriminations that's occurred in the environment. And then on top of that, then not being there. So we want to be very careful. Organizations want to be very intentional about not creating a new class of workers that are discriminated against. Those who are working from home, or those who are working remotely. And so what are some of the things organizations can do? And I'm going to speak to one before turning it back to you, Sinead, and that is, this is a simple one, and this is self-advocacy here. We say in meetings, we never want to lose the remote. You know what it's like, you're sitting on your couch, you lose the remote, you look for it. You don't want to do that. So number one strategy for avoiding losing the remote, those who are remote always speak first. There's a question, remote speak first. There's an answer, remote speak first. Because we don't want to lose the remote. But let me go back to Sinead. Sinead, your thoughts on that. How do we make sure we don't lose the remotes?
I love that. That's a great tip. And I did not use that last Monday and Tuesday, and I should have done that. So thank you for that. See, we're all learning all the time. I think, there's one thing is about the language. And if we are, when we talk about the second-class citizen and not being a second-class citizen, by the mere fact that we're actually talking about and using the language of second-class citizen, we could actually weave that into our cultural language. And then, we create it without meaning to. So I think we have to be careful about language, and I'll give you a perfect example. I had said at the beginning that we onboarded over 1,000 people during COVID. We were calling them the COVID cohort, right? And so there was no intent in that. It was, they were a cohort. They came in during COVID, and we were calling them a COVID cohort, and it stuck, right? And ouch. And it is kind of an ouch moment, right? So, and again, there was no ill intent. So language is really, really important, right? So I think that is one thing. The other thing, and this was such a gift to me. I was giving a webinar, I don't know, maybe about 6 or 7 months ago. It was kind of halfway through the pandemic. And it's kind of format similar to this. And people were dialing in, and the facilitator, the host, said, do what's comfortable for you. You can be off camera if you're more comfortable. And a lady piped up and she said, I would really appreciate if you all would stay on camera because I'm deaf and I have to read lips. I'm going to tell you, Michael, it hit me like a ton of bricks because I did not think of that. I did not think of that. And so we're so busy going, oh, I'm sick of being on a camera and blah, 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 and not necessarily thinking of what it means for those that might need more accommodation for that, the experience that others are having because they need to be able to see your body language, you know, all of that. And that, I will never forget that moment as long as I live.
I am sure you will not. And I could, in this environment, we continue to run hundreds of meetings every year, of course, for our clients. And my number one toughest client throughout the pandemic, one client, well-known organization, and their culture is cameras off. It is so tough to run a highly engaging session. I even had one person from that organization say, well, Michael, I see that you're not happy with what I just said. Well, it's great that you can see me, right? Because I couldn't read her body language at all because it's just really, really tough. And I understand the science that's behind seeing yourself and the fatigue that comes with it. But the level of engagement and the level of productivity that's way reduced when you have a group of people together without being able to see each other. Wow, that's tough. It's like saying, hey, listen, let's have a meeting, but we're going to all be in different rooms. And that'll be better, right? Because we'll all be in different rooms. Tough. For what it's worth. So that's my own soapbox. And so really being clear that we don't create. And I appreciate it. In fact, Edgar said, we appreciate your comment. Using us to mean those in the office and them referring to those working remotely and vice versa is already being adopted widely. Huge red flag. Got that and hear that well, like a huge red flag and being careful. Steve mentions that, hey, sometimes it's just the bandwidth issues. Understood, but that's by exception as opposed to the rule. Yeah. And some organization has done it as a rule. I'm recognizing the time and I do want to get to these last two really quickly. Proactively addressing the Great Resignation. Let's talk about what it is. You know, we know it is, and we know the statistics are there. That if you saw the September numbers, 4.2 million people quit their jobs last month or in September. A hugely disparate number from the past. And so we wanted to ask who's planning on resigning, but we realized you may have a little trouble being honest there. So we'd like to answer you a different question. And it's around what percentage of the people you've talked with about this have admitted they are seriously considering resigning from their organization. And so we'd love to get your thoughts on what you have found there. What percentage have indicated that they are really considering seriously, the people you've talked with about this, they're seriously considering resigning and their employment. So again, we'll leave this open just quickly for another 10 seconds just to see what the numbers are and where people are falling. And this may surprise you, everyone. So counting down, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and close that poll. Take a look. So 40% of you said, hey, less than 20%. But you know, that means 60% of you have said more than 20%. And 13% of you have said 60 to 79%. You get the idea. And you know, what's full employment by the U.S. Department of Labor standard is 4% people looking for jobs. If we're saying 60% of you are saying 20% or more, you get the idea. It is a thing that's going on right now. And so we'd love to get things we could do, strategies to address the Great Resignation. It'll be our last topic before as we move into closing. All right, Sinead, your thoughts? What are the things that organizations might want to consider doing?
Yeah, so I mean, data, right? You got to look at the data and know why your people are leaving. And
yes.
You got to do, you know, you got to talk to people before they say, why are you going? What's the real reason? You know, if somebody's decided to go, they didn't just wake up one morning and say, I'm leaving. This has been going on for a while. We know that people mostly leave not because of the money or their compensation and their benefits, but because, you know, they're you know, and not aligning to the purpose. They're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. They want to be creating value, and so they want to be able to grow, right? So know your organization, know what makes your organization tick. That's really, really important. And create opportunity for people. You know, purpose is, that's one thing that's loud and clear, certainly in our organization, which is why we spend so much time being transparent around purpose, right? So I think that's, like, really quickly, I think that's part of it. That's
being clear on purpose, as you said, and really getting, and you mentioned something before that I just love, the idea of having stay interviews, making sure you know, and you had mentioned once before that if you have someone leaving and you're surprised, it really says something that's not really good. You should never be surprised when someone departs, and those stay interviews help it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about taking action so that you can be intentional. Just want to run through the strategies you've heard from Sinead as we've been going through. Let's recap those. One, and that's the first one, be intentional about your hybrid workplace. Two, establish specific policies to ensure remote employees are not second-class citizens. Level the field. If you have remote, exercise self-advocacy, which you heard Sinead say over and over again. Have a specific plan for ensuring your presence and impact's not diminished. As leaders, what do? Keep our people engaged, build community to keep the connection, be proactive in holding stay interviews with your team members, and then as an organization, provide training for leaders, managers, and supervisors on strategies for facilitating success in the hybrid workflow. And we have a number of different courses and offerings for you. And would love to know in this final poll, what's the best way for us to follow up with you that's most appropriate? If you're interested in training for a group, okay, how do we do this hybrid thing? What do we do with our leaders? How do we get our people self-advocating? Please let us know about that. It may be for yourself. Maybe interested in hiring a facilitator or advise on hybrid. If you have a different need and a workshop, that's fine, or nothing for now. Thanks for the webinar. So love to get your feel for where you are in that, because we're doing a number of different things and we'll be having more information available, but would love to get your feel for where you are and how we can best follow up with you. So we'll leave that up for any final questions. Oh, but Miller has said that she's learned so much from you over the years and wanted to say hi to you. And so it's great. Thank you, Elisa. Other questions, Patty? Do you see other questions that people have that we can cover in these last couple of minutes before we close?
Yes. And also, in a minute, you'll see that Sam will put in the chat the survey for today. So we've got two things going on. We've got the survey the poll that's up. So once you answer that, and then there'll be a survey. And if you fill out the survey that's in the chat, you'll receive the white paper, and then you'll also receive the slides from today. And people have already asked for that. So, and besides that, while we're getting those two things, we have had a common theme, Michael, today of some love for you and Sinead. That is for sure. And really, the message is resonating. But let's see, for questions, for Jennifer, flexibility with work time and space is one of hers and her coworkers' biggest concern as they move back to going back to the office. And then for Shyam, it's divergent employee experiences, and hybrid is an unavoidable challenge. To address bridging the gap, 100% behind Sinead's comment of creating any safety, and a safe space for all employees. And she's a rock star, he says, by creating safety and space, by the way.
And that's great to hear. And as you think about, yeah, and I was going to say on the creating the space, really important that we do not a good job, but an excellent job of engaging our people and understanding what they need. Because what a Guidewire needs won't necessarily be the same as what a manufacturing company will need, or what a nonprofit company will need, organization, or a government agency. So getting your people engaged and telling you, here's what will help in building the kind of environment we want. Essential. The communication, the connection, all the things Sinead has been talking about.
Great.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Well,
and we are at time, so I want to remind you to do the survey that's in the chat, And I want to thank both of you, Michael and Sinead. That was an incredible hour. And thank you for all that great information, and everybody that participated on the call. We hope that you took away some tools and some techniques and some things that you can use immediately. We appreciate your participation. Everybody, have a great day.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Take care.